Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these little guys right here. These are the Demko Knives AD-20.5. That's right, we've gone into decimals now. But first, in the name of full disclosure, I want to thank Demko Knives for sending one of these guys along, or well, actually two of these guys along, right? I reached out to them when this was first announced because, dude, I love the AD-20, and when they said, hey, production version, I'm totally in. But I told them, as always, I'm going to talk about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly. They might be a gem, might be junk. They still did send it along. Nonetheless, we do have to assume these are the very best quality controlled one of these guys ever. And I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature and quality of my review, but there you go, full disclosure. Next thing, let's do some size comparison. And because these are actually slightly different, we'll go ahead and start off actually with a size comparison against a ruler. What we see here is the handles are identical, but the blades are a little bit different. This guy is coming in a little bit under 3¼ inches, whereas this guy is coming in pretty uncontroversially under 3 inches. So there is actually a blade size difference. That's not just your eyes, playing tricks on you, so to speak. But we'll go ahead and put it up against the conventional size comparison knives. We have right here the Spyderco, the Ontario Rat number 2. No, this isn't the Spyderco, but we see here blade lengthwise pretty similar to the Shark's Foot. Yeah, that's right. That's the term for it. Right there we have the Spyderco Delica right in the middle here. So bigger than the Delica, but yeah, there's that. And then finally, here it is against the Spyderco PM2. In this case, it is the River's Edge Cutlery, one of their ongoing sprint sort of things. My other PM2 is elsewhere at the moment, but nonetheless, that is the PM2, and that's the size of it. And then finally, the most important size comparison for these guys is actually against the full size, against the AD-20. And what we see here is that the AD-20, this is my, full version from Demko Knives, from my collection. It is bigger in a pretty remarkable way. Not only is it bigger on the overall, but it is also much thicker. We see here as the blade thickness is much reduced in these guys. It is just this is a much more svelte knife overall relative to that. Next thing, where are these guys coming from? Is this made by the Demkos? Well, yes and no. It's Demko Knives. This is a new brand. Demko Knives has been around, but this is new production work, right? This is sort of their first foray into a more mass market production kind of thing. And these are being made in Taiwan, right? They're not any more specific than that, but nonetheless, these are overseas made. The price on these guys is coming in at $150 for both of them. There are the two blade shapes here, the clip point and the Shark's Foot, which LOL, okay. And then finally, who the heck is Demko Knives? Maybe some of you haven't heard of this. Demko is, Andrew Demko is a designer. This is also Andrew and John. They're working together now, but Andrew Demko is one of the best known designers who's not maybe all that known to a lot of people, right? He designed a lot of Cold Steel's most famous folders out there. Like some of Cold Steel's best work is actually Andrew Demko's work. And honestly, he's one of my favorite designers. His stuff tends to be very beefy and overbuilt very often, and so it's not usually in my category, but at the same time, I think wherever Demko goes, smart knife folks should follow. He's one of the best designers working today, and it's really exciting to see him doing production sorts of stuff like this as well. I think that's going to fill a really good void, and that's a beautiful thing. So let's go ahead and jump into the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of this guy right here. Good side. Start with, we are looking at pretty solid ergos right here. The shock lock is definitely, you can feel it oftentimes against the bottom of your thumb here as you work up, but it kind of needs to, either if you're choked back, then it's a thumb ramp, right? But if you're choked up further, you need to be a little bit further than it, right? But with my hands, it works absolutely fine. Ergonomically speaking, it's good to go with a very nice texturing here. But one thing that's worth noting is, note this little pad is present on both sides. That is to prevent the texturing from catching underneath the clip as you pull this guy in and out of your pocket. That's a little detail, but that's a major thing. Like the fact that they did that, that's smart. That illustrates really good design chops right off the bat, and I appreciate that. Next thing, this is a fully ambidextrous knife with options for right and left clip, although this is a, this clip can't be swapped over, but they offer a lefty clip for it, making this a fully ambidextrous knife because you have thumb studs on both sides, the hole on both sides, and the shock lock is right down the middle, right? So there's absolutely no concern with that at all. That's good. Next thing, this has two nice blade shapes to it. The clip point is pretty vanilla, right? With some flat, some belly, and nice pokey tip. And then you've got yourselves the Shark's Foot, which is not quite a one cliff. It's not entirely straight across here. I'll kind of show you that off. You can see that it's got a little bit of curvation to it, but at the same time, these are both solid blade shapes. They're both using thinner stock than the original AD-20, which was a little bit much. I'm going to be real here. This is the thickest stock I've ever loved in a knife. And even still, I think the knife is markedly better with a reasonably thick stock, right? And the grinds on it are reasonable. They could maybe a little bit thinner, but at the same time, it works out. And they've added a sharpening choil in here, which is a beautiful thing and makes these guys much easier to sharpen the first time and maintain later on. Next thing, I like the fact that they actually have two different blade lengths here. This is going to make this guy legal in places with a 3-inch law, and this guy legal for folks with 3.5-inch laws, right? I appreciate that we've got that option, and you can also choose which version you like a little bit more. Oftentimes, a sheep's foot or Warncliffe blade is going to be really nice for utility cutting. There are lots of options here, but both of them work very well, and I like that you've got a choice of legality here. And then finally, I love the size of these guys. I mean, predictably, I tend to like smaller knives. This is a fact of my life and my channel, and the AD-20 is sort of hilariously big for me in my daily life. I like this size a lot. This is strictly better for everyday carry for me. And the moment that they make a full titanium AD-20.5, like in this size with serious steel, I am so in. Just take my damn money, Demkos. Just take it. Because this is just a really good size, and this extra thinness, this just carries a lot better and just feels like a little bit more of an everyday carry-friendly knife than the big guy, which you are definitely... Well, it's a big guy. We'll just put it that way. So, to me, all of that is the good. It's got a great size, different blade sizes here, nice blade shape. It's fully ambi. The pad's under the clip, and the ergos are very solid. To me, on the great side of these guys is the lock, 100%. This is the Demko Knives shock lock, and it's very simple. In order to open the knife, you press the thumb stud, or you can also use this little hole here to flick it open with your finger there. And then to close the knife, all you need to do is, see this little thing, the shock fin sticking up? Just pull it back. And now, blade closes. But with that open, blade is completely secure and locked in place. If you want a closer look at how that works, watch the disassembly video where I show it to you with the knife open, and you'll see exactly how it works. But the fact is, it is a really graceful design. And I say that not lightly. There are a lot of locks out there that are very complicated, that are like, wow, that's 12 screws and 6 springs, and oh boy, yeah, the knife locks now. Whereas this is just very, very simple. It is one relatively weirdly shaped piece of metal here that just interacts with another weirdly shaped piece of metal at the back of the blade there, and it works. It works 100%, and I have loved the shock lock in the original size, and I've loved it in this small size too, and it's very nice because disengaging it is a one-handed affair, and it's also very, very easy. There's not a whole lot of like fine motor skills. Your fingers are never in the slicing path. You just pop it open, and you can also, for what it's worth, if you want to use a little bit of wrist, you pull this back, and you can pop the knife open without even using the thumb stud. So you get a bunch of, and the fidget ability is just over the, oh man, is this good. With a really nice action running on bearings. The shock lock is just a really elegant and excellent design. And I love it, and it's something that I hope to see in more and more knives in the future, and seeing it in a more accessible form factor than the, high-end, more custom-like Demkos. Yeah, that's a win. So to me, the shock lock is great, and it is the great about these knives. That is what makes these guys exceptional, and it is really, really good. On the bad side, to start with a nitpick, guys, 20.5 makes it sound like it should be bigger, not smaller. Technically, this should be the 19.5, or maybe the 19. I don't know. I'm not... who knows? Maybe, or if it's years, it's the 2021, right? I don't know. But anyways, that's not beside the point. Speaking of nitpicks, the other thing that kind of bugs me a little bit is on the side of this, and to be fair, this is how their other knives have always been, but they have Wampum, PA, which is the city I gather they're based out of. Problem is, that makes a lot of sense when these are being made in the States, but putting Wampum, PA on a knife that is also made in Taiwan, a little weird to me, right? It just feels a little bit, I don't know, off. It's not the end of the world, right? I'm not going to drag them for it, and if that's a big enough part of their branding that they can, but it's a little bit strange, right? I was a little surprised they kept that rather than putting something else on the backside of that there. Whatever, not a big deal. Next thing, one thing that doesn't bug me, but I know bugs a lot of people, is there is this gap in the back here. You can see there is this pretty substantial gap, actually. That's just a natural consequence of how this guy has to work with the stop pin and whatnot, the shock lock, but at the same time, that is something you should keep in mind. If that bugs you, it's going to bug you there too. Next thing, the thumb stud on this guy is sort of approaching the slicing path. I'm nitpicking here, but, I think it's a knife that merits it, right? But it's sort of approaching the slicing path, meaning that especially if you're cutting in this direction, this will absolutely be hanging up on whatever you're cutting. Not the end of the world, but it's definitely a thing. Although it's also, I didn't try it, but you could probably unscrew this thumb stud and take it out altogether if you wanted to, and then just flick it open, either using the lock or the gap there. Then, next thing, the sides of the shock lock here are a little bit on the sharp side. I'd like to see this tumbled a chamfered or something along those lines just a little bit more to make this a little bit less, well, frankly, sharp, right? It's a shark lock, but it doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to bite, right? So I'd like to see that get rounded off a little bit more. I think it would just make the whole thing a little bit better, and especially given that this is going to be out in your pocket with whatever else you're carrying, that's not ideal. This should definitely be chamfered down. And then finally on the bad side, bordering on ugly, is the steel choice here is AUS 10A. Now, okay, I'm being a steel snob here. I'm going to fully admit that. And steel very often matters less for most people than most other components of the knife, which is why this is not that huge of a demerit. I'm trying to grow here. But this is AUS 10A, and the knife is $150. Now, the price is fine. The steel can be fine, but the steel and the price together, not compelling particularly. That feels to me like a cut corner, right? It's a fine steel. It's pretty easy to sharpen, which is good because you'll be doing it a fair amount, and it's perfectly reasonable in a lower cost knife. Put differently, this is a budget steel, but I don't feel like this is a budget knife, right? At $150, the competition here are things closer to like the PM2, to some of Benchmade stuff, and the competition is usually in like S30V, 35V, and that kind of world, right? So I'm just not super convinced by that steel choice. If you don't mind sharpening regularly, then this is going to be just fine. And this design is sort of covering for the steel choice, but I'm still not a big fan of the choice. And it turned a, oh my god, hit out of the park gem into kind of a slid into home between the catcher's legs sort of affair. This is definitely the weakness of this knife, I feel like. From a higher end collector perspective, like guys, the price, again, it could have been fine at the right price, and it could have been fine at the right steel, but together, not so much. So, to me, all of that is the bad, is that AUS 10A is not a great choice at this kind of a price point. The sides of the shock lock are a little peckery here. The thumb stud is a little bit out there. There is a pretty big gap between the blade and the handle when it's closed. It's a little weird to put a U.S. place name on an overseas knife, and AD-20.5 makes it sound bigger rather than smaller. On the ugly front, I was borderline as to whether to throw the steel into ugly, but it's going to be fine for most people. So let's go into the final conclusion, which is that this is a really excellent and exciting design. And it's one that I took a bit of extra time with, as you probably saw by everybody else having their review out, right? Because there is a ton of good here, with very solid ergonomics, with nice design details, full ambi construction, a nice blade in two different sizes, and a much more carryable size for what it's worth. And availability is the big thing here. These are actually going to be purchasable because they're going to be a production piece at a price that I think a lot of people are going to be able to swing. There are some nitpicks, but also the thumb stud's a little out there. The sides of the shock lock are a little, well, bitey. And they've gone with a budget steel on something that isn't really a budget knife, and that's a little bit of a shame. But one thing that's worth noting as you're thinking about this knife is the power of design, right? Without the strength of the design, without the novelty of the shock lock here, this, well, let's put it this way. An overseas-made AUS 10A knife at $150 would, it would have an uphill battle, to put it very nicely. But with this design and with this lock, and only by virtue of that, they have still managed gem status here. This is a very, very good design, which is covering up for a little bit of deficiency in the material department there. And I do hope that they choose to drop the price or raise the steel. Either one would work fine for me. At some point in time down the road, that'll take some of the sting off and make it compelling to more folks. But because of the hype, I know they're going to sell each and every one of these in any damn steel. But once that hype fades a little bit, I think they need to up their game. But steel snobbery aside, though, this is a great knife. It really, really is. This form factor is going to be strictly better for most people's daily lives than the full-size beast of the AD-20 was, right? And I really hope that this form factor comes to their custom and machine ground lineup as well. And more importantly, though, availability is going to be better for this, right? You will now actually have a chance. The shock lock was one of the nicest things in the knife world in 2020. It was one of the, frankly, it was one of the nicest things in 2020. 2020 didn't have a lot going for it. But anyways, the shock lock was really, really good. And the fact that there is now going to be an option for people to pick one of these guys up at an actual retailer at a price that is going to be attainable for a lot of folks. Not cheap, but attainable for a lot of folks with some planning. That's absolutely a beautiful thing, right? This puts a really compelling lock into the pocket of a lot more enthusiasts, which is really, really nice. And more importantly, I love seeing Demko Knives starting their own gig, right? Demko is one of the very few designers with a long, proven, and pretty diverse track record of knives who I think could support a company all of his own, right? And especially now that cold steel has been bought out by a bigger firm, so to speak, I think there's going to be a hole in the market that they can fill. So I hope that this is very much the first of many production knives out of Demko Knives, and that they continue to do this and target a pretty diverse market. Maybe, swinging some prices lower, going a little higher. I love seeing the idea of Demko as a production knife company there. And so, final conclusions, this is a great lock. It's an impressive design, and it leads to a knife that I think altogether is really, really great. There's a reason a lot of folks love this. This is a really great way to start a brand new brand. And, whether it's an extra 0.5 past the 20, I can't tell you that. But at the very least, it's a really, really nice little piece. And you'll be looking pretty shocked with one of these hanging in your pocket. No? No? Okay, that was bad. Anyways, I hope this has been interesting, that you enjoyed my reviewing Demko Knives, and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.